In this next sequence, we're going to be utilising the wall to provide us with support, and we're also going to be really aware of the support of gravity as well. And this is a specifically good practice for women who have been diagnosed with pelvic organ prolapse. So pelvic organ prolapse is a really common condition. It will affect at least 50% of childbearing women. It will also affect non-childbearing women to a degree, because gravity has an effect on the pelvic floor. If we have had a chronic cough, or we've been a heavy lifter due to our profession, then this condition is also, it places us at high risk of this condition. So the next sequence I dedicate to my beautiful friend and teacher, Maria, and it's a fantastic way of experiencing some of the shapes and stretches of traditional asana, but with gravity eliminated. And what the gravity eliminated position ensures is that the organs aren't being pressed onto the pelvic floor, but we're still managing to experience some of the wonderful health benefits of the postures. So to come into a legs up the wall position first, to do that safely, we want to actually come through side lying. So we're going to actually lie on our side with our hips close to the wall and come onto the side lying position with the sitting bones as close to the wall as you feel comfortable. And then we roll onto the back to kick the legs up the wall. And if we notice that the neck is a little, the chin's pointing towards the ceiling and we have trouble keeping length in the back of the neck, we might need to have some kind of support from a yoga blanket or a towel or something underneath the back of the head to make this position more comfortable for us. Maybe we don't need that lift, but that's going to be an option for people. And while we're settling into the position, what we're also getting to understand about our pelvis is that we don't want to be sinking into the abdominal so that the lower back presses entirely against the floor. So we still want to keep that gentle curve in the lower back to a degree. And what that will mean is the sitting bones are going to sink down towards the area where the wall meets with the floor. And we're also going to keep that slight blueberry-sized space behind the lower back to a degree. So for some people, that will mean they'll have to shuffle their way, their sitting bones away from the wall slightly, especially if you've got tight hamstrings. So legs up the wall is a fantastic variation to Viparita Karani, which is just sometimes a little too strong on the pelvis and pelvic floor. So legs up the wall takes the pressure off the abdominals and core muscles and allows the pelvic floor to gently sink back towards the body, and that resets the organs. We might also find that when we're in a seated position, wide-legged postures like Upavista Konasana are really not great because they stretch the levator hiatus open, and that is a no-no for someone with a prolapse. So we might like to actually do Upavista Konasana with wall support, which still enables us to experience the lovely inner thigh stretch. It gives us the lovely hamstring stretch. It supports us to feel the benefits of Upavista Konasana without gravitational forces on a pelvic floor that might already have enough to deal with against gravity. So we always, again, just take that rule of thumb that a 5-breath hold is really our minimum for creating the lengthening and softening that we require, and longer if we have time, but for the purposes of this demonstration, we'll spend about 5 breaths in each posture. So our next posture is Baddha Konasana. which in sitting can actually be a really difficult posture, not just for the pelvic floor, but also for lower backs. So we could also try Baddha Konasana in the reclined position with the wall support. And a lovely way to create integrity and support for the pelvis here is to take the hands around the outer thighs, so that as we take the knees wide and we press into the hands on the outer thighs, there's a real sense of containment as we press the little toe sides of the feet together. And this can be super supportive for an inner thigh stretch. We'll notice the sitting bones separate here. We'll notice the body coming into a lovely sense of support from the gravitational forces behind the back. And where we'll go next is into a squat. So wide-legged squats are very, very strong on pelvic floors. Wide-legged squats will separate the sitting bones and increase the levator hiatus. Wide-legged squats can also lead to a worsening of prolapse. So this legs on, feet onto the wall, knees towards the chest. This can be our alternative to squats. We're not getting any weight-bearing pressure on the hips and knees with this squat. We're still experiencing the lovely deep flexion of the hips and knees without loading the hips and knees up with gravity. But most importantly for the pelvic floor, we're experiencing gravitational support. The organs are not pressing against that widened sitting bone position. And as a result, we're protected from worsening prolapse. We could even segue from the wide-legged squat into a happy baby pose. And if we really wanted to make the happy baby pose an incredibly good anti-prolapse position, we could actually take a blanket or a bolster or a towel and place it underneath the hips for a little bit of hip elevation. So any kind of elevation under the hips is obviously going to support our anti-gravity positions, and it's going to help us tip into our happy baby pose even further. And it's going to give us a beautiful sense of really letting gravity therapeutically manage us. And isn't that nice to be in that passive state of letting gravity do the work for our bodies? So good for those of us that perhaps are overworking without realizing it. So we also encounter this issue quite often where a prolapse or a pelvic pain condition has been worsened by tight hip rotator muscles. So we could also take the feet against the wall and just remove the elevation of your blanket, bolster or block for a moment. We might need to wriggle away from the wall a little bit for this position, and then we're going to take the left ankle onto the right thigh and come into our figure 4 or thread the needle stretch. But we're using the wall, the right foot against the wall, to just gently allow for a lovely traction or counter force to the stretch in the left buttock. So the wall becomes our counter force, the right foot against the wall becomes our counter force for that gentle stretch into the left hip rotators. And those deep hip rotators love this stretch because they're often overactivating to compensate for a weak pelvic floor musculature. 2 more long, soft breaths. here. And then let's change sides. So it's the left foot to the wall, right ankle crosses the left thigh. If we notice a big difference between sides, we might even need to push away from the wall even more slightly there. I know on my right hip side, I'm a lot tighter than the left. And as with any pose, we're finding that place where we're not too bored. So there's enough intensity or vitality being experienced for us to not become too bored. But it's not so strong that it's making us overactivated or overstimulated or angry. The space between boredom and anger, we want to find that. That's our poised position. And holding for 2 more long, soft breaths here. And releasing. So for the last posture, we're going to roll onto the side and just set the mat up for a supported shoulder stand. So the supported shoulder stand against the wall is a really, really awesome way to help somebody to achieve a shoulder stand, especially if they've been a little bit frightened about doing shoulder stands away from support or where they need that extra bit of propping. So use your blanket or towel underneath the mat to just create a little bit of height under the shoulders and neck for your supported shoulder stand. And this creates a little bit of height for the shoulders and neck. We come into the supported shoulder stand in the same way that we came into legs up the wall. We place the shoulder onto the height and then we roll onto the back. Make sure the backs of the shoulders are supported onto the height of the mat. We take the feet onto the wall as we did before. We take the weight into the backs of the shoulders and the backs of the arms primarily. We keep the back of the neck long and soft, and we never turn the head when we come into the shoulder stand. And for the purposes of utilizing the wall support, we're just going to use the wall to gently press vertebrae by vertebrae into a chest towards chin variation, really pressing into the backs of the shoulder blades, the backs of the arms, the feet. And this inversion is absolute paradise for the pelvic floor that might be experiencing some level of prolapse, which will always be worse towards the end of the day. So this is a wonderful, wonderful way to counter the effects of gravity on the pelvic floor. And we can also lower down vertebrae by vertebrae and lift back up vertebrae by vertebrae in a sequence that enables us to warm the spine and engage with the breath, exhaling perhaps to lower and inhaling to lift. And this is great for strengthening up gluteal muscles that might be a little weak. And as we've explored, weak hip muscles like glutes can often lead to a tendency to try and gain strength by overactivating or even pressing in a downwards direction in the pelvic floor muscles that actually worsens prolapse. And we might like to pause while we enjoy the inversion. And when we're ready to lower down, we want to come out of this posture safely. So to come out of the posture safely, there's 2 ways. We can either take the feet to the floor and wriggle away from the height, or we can roll onto the side and just make sure we use our arms to press up into sitting, which actually keeps the back nice and safe. Hope you enjoyed that sequence. Thank you so much to my beautiful teacher, Maria, for really making that sequence happen. Namaste.